Might as well just get started here while we wait. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another fantastic webinar brought to you by the C45 Quality Association. My name is Tom Ulanowski, and I'm the chair of the C45 Quality Association. And I love being able to sit down with industry peers and discuss some of the most important topics for our industry for all of you to get a better understanding of those topics and hopefully find some solutions to the problems that this industry is having. As we're waiting for everyone to log in, I'll just take a moment to introduce our association and what we do. And then, of course, I'll introduce our esteemed guests here, and then we'll get started. So the C45 Quality Association, as some of you may or may not know, is quite a unique association in our industry. We are non-for-profit, a federal non-for-profit organization, and we're 100% membership backed. We're not corporate backed, much like the other associations. So we represent about 100 members in the quality, regulatory, and testing sector here in Canada. We were started by industry professionals about 4 years ago, I believe. We have a board of directors of 6, and we do a number of different things to kind of further our mission to promote reasonable regulations in this cannabis industry. Often we put on webinars like this, most of the time free to the public, sometimes for only our members, such as like sampling workshops that are a bit more longer. We also interface with our regulators on a regular basis, namely Health Canada. So what we do is we distill the feedback we get from our members and the industry at large and provide constructive feedback and potential solutions, either verbally and in writing, on a regular basis. And that's been really great because, you know, COVID has kind of disconnected the industry from the regulators, and you know, the industry is moving quickly and changing a lot. And so it's important that the regulators are aware of this conversation and part of it. So if you are interested in learning more, I encourage all of you to visit our website, c45association.com. From there, you can look at kind of some recent events or past events that we've done. We've actually just launched a members-only online portal, which is going to really increase our effective communication between our members in this industry and give our members an ability to network and have a quick discourse when topics come up. Memberships start at $49 plus processing fees for students. And that just gives us some resources to run this organization because all of us are volunteers. Really, we do this out of a kind of the goodness of our heart, if you will. So we're always looking for members. We're always looking for directors and volunteers, speakers as well. So if you at any point want to learn more, go to our website or reach us at the team at c45association.com. And we'll get back to you promptly. And if you're interested in participating in one of these or putting something on, we're happy to look at that. So thanks everyone for joining us. We're at 150 almost currently, so this is great. Okay, so we're going to start here. And why we're all here today speaking with some representatives from some of the biggest labs here in Canada is on the topic of cannabis testing. But as many of you are aware, any license holder has to subject the cannabis that they sell to a battery of tests for chemical and microbial contaminants. But we're not going to be talking about those today. We're going to be focusing on the cannabinoids, the potency, something that's required by the regulations to be tested and labeled on every single cannabis product. We're going to narrow our scope even more to primarily dried cannabis, simply because extracts and edibles are much more homogeneous substances. There are definitely challenges there, and we can discuss those. But a lot of the time, we're seeing issues or potential issues with the tests reported for dried cannabis, namely that they're kind of been creeping up over the years to the point where I think everyone should be a bit skeptical. So what we're going to do today is have an organic discussion. I'm going to be moderating because this is such a touchy subject with a lot of passionate people in the industry. I'm going to do my best as the moderator to keep it constructive and professional. And so what we want for all of you to get out of this is to understand the issue understand the nuances or the details of the issues, and ultimately, hopefully, some solutions that we as an industry can do while we wait for potential changes to the regulations or enforcement, if we think that's needed. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel here. I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds to kind of state their name, who they're representing, their experience. Let's just keep it short because we want to get started. So I'm just going to go in whatever order is on my screen. So Hubert, please, the floor is yours. Tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Hubert Marceau. I am the co-founder, chemist, and director of development at Laboratoire PhytoChemia in Quebec. And we have been in this industry since 2014, and we work with plants in general.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next up, Andrien from RPC. Please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm Andrien Rackov. I'm the supervisor of research services at RPC. RPC is a provincial research organization in New Brunswick, and we do lots of research, analytical testing, and provide engineering services to many sectors, including cannabis. We got involved in cannabis through hemp when we started testing hemp products in the late 90s.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrien. And Andrien's actually done a presentation for us previously on some illicit versus licit cannabis testing that was done by RPC. Thank you. Next up, we have John from High North. John, please introduce yourself.
So I'm John Slaughter, the CEO and founder of High North. I founded High North in 2016 when I was working in product innovation in the nutraceutical industry. Created High North because I created the partner that I wish I had in the nutraceutical space. And I believe that cannabis needed its own laboratory, needed its own focus. I have a lot of respect for the plant as a recreational and medicinal user. And I really wanted to create that lab to be that partner to elevate Canadian cannabis across the world. So I'm here today, and this is a conversation that's obviously very interesting and for us as well, as all we do is cannabis. That's all we ever work on. So for the industry, this is important and it needs the attention. So I'm glad we're here today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for coming on. Up next here, we have Daryl Patterson from A&L. Daryl and A&L have been a big supporter of C45 throughout the years. Thank you. Please, Daryl, let us know about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm Daryl Patterson, A&L Labs. We've been lab for about 4 years. Been in cannabis since about 2015, and I'm a manager in the cannabis department. And yeah, we're just focused on everything involved in cannabis, from the soil that you grow it in right through to your final product. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this topic today, and hopefully we can get some great discussion going on.
Thanks, Daryl. And last but certainly not least, we have Prasant from PhytoChemia. Prasant, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Prasant, and we started PhytoChemia in 2017. And we have been dealing with food, natural health product, cannabis, and pharmaceutical products. And I come from a science background and a business background. So I have very good experience on both sides of the business. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So I'll just remind all of our attendees here that throughout the whole session here for the next about 45 minutes, we're going to be talking, and then we'll kind of turn it over to Q&A. Use the Q&A feature on Zoom. Just send us the questions. We will be kind of looking at those as we go. Maybe we'll address them on the fly, but we'll probably save them till the end. And of course, if we run out of time, I'm sorry, we're on a tight schedule here, but this is not the last time I'm sure we'll be talking about this. Okay. So yeah, we have almost 200 people listening. This is fantastic. And based on the registration list, it's great to see that we have a lot of people from the industry here, people that work at license holders and testing labs. We also have provincial and federal government representatives on the call. So again, the reason we do this is because we can all get into a virtual room together and have this discussion. So let's kick it off. I'm going to just open it up to anyone of our panelists. Why are we here? What are we seeing in the industry when it comes to potency testing for cannabis, specifically dried cannabis, that has contributed to what we're all feeling today?
I think what we're seeing is an industry in the process of structuring itself. If you look at other industries that have been working with natural health product or plant material in the last 50 to 60, 65 years, there's always this step into the industry maturation where the value of a product is so tied to a single value that you start to see a race to the top in this value, regardless of the real value. We are currently, I believe, into the kind of the transition process where it is now becoming more and more, people are becoming more and more aware of the situation, which will lead to what I believe is the next step, which will be harsher regulation from the regulator. And this is what we've been seeing in a lot of industry. For example, essential oil with the lavender and the linalool content. I like to spot Borex as an example in the geology sector with the gold and the responsibility of the analyst, and more whimsically the capsaicin content in hot pepper, where we're also seeing this kind of inflation at the moment, but the financial incentive are less strong.
Yeah, that's a great point. We often consider cannabis to be very unique, but it really does mirror a lot of other industries. And I'm glad you brought up the mining sector, or the essential oil, or even supplement sector, where the value of that product is so closely tied to what's on that label. But let's kind of take a step back and what are the red flags that we're seeing here? I mean, in other words, when we look at large data sets, peer-reviewed publications, other jurisdictions, when we focus in on dried cannabis, what should we expect the average potency? Let's just focus on THC here, for a sample or a batch. What are we seeing, or what should we expect versus kind of what are we seeing now?
I'd happily take that. We published our normal curve about 2 months ago up online. And that was really what I look at, and what really has irked me. And we've been going now, I think, about 15 months, maybe 16 months into seeing stuff that falls off the normal curve. We're now over 20,000 samples of dry flower that we've done to date. And when I look at how that normal curve goes, a bulk of the product should be between that 22 to 26. The curve then becomes very harsh. And if you haven't seen it online, it was published through Stratcan, so check it out on there, it's online. But as you see that curve, it starts to very sharp and very hard down before 30%. As you cross over 30%, you're getting into the 99th percentile. As you cross 32%, you're in the 99.9th percentile. And for anybody out there who understands how far away that is, and how the kind of graph works, anything beyond that point, you're pushing science. So as you get above 33, maybe one. But as you start to get into 38, 40, yeah, you're off the normal curve and you're off of science. When you think of adding terpenes on top of that, adding moisture on top of that, where's the room for the plant? And so I think that's really what it is for anyone who's even followed the analytics, you're off the charts. For anybody who's a chemist, the chemistry now doesn't work. And I think right now this is a problem we've seen in other countries, and other spots. Look at Michigan right now. There's 67.9% THC flower being sold in Michigan right now. That's the slippery slope, and I I'd love to agree with you to see that we're kind of coming to the end of this, but I still think we got a lot more to go, and we're probably going to see some more hilarious THC scores hit the market probably soon. So
For sure,
it's definitely, I think, whether you're a chemist, whether you're in analytics, whether you're an old school smoker, no matter what you are, we've just broken any type of reality.
yeah. So thanks, John. So based on your data and data I've seen from Washington State, other jurisdictions, 18 to 20% is kind of the average flower sold on the market. Can anyone kind of delve into that a bit? And you touched on this, John, about statistical kind of confidence, but where can we draw the line in the sand based on these kind of normal distribution curves? And when should anyone start getting suspicious when they see a label? What is that kind of magic number? If we assume 18 to 20% is the average, does anyone else want to take that on?
If I can add, Tom, what we have seen are a little different from what John mentioned. The few customers, what we are seeing a new trend in higher THC. And when we work with our customers, we wonder, so these high THC are consistently high, and the customer says, you know what, we have been working some new genetics, or we have been doing R&D, and this science is evolving. So what we have seen 4 years or 1 year back, it's keep on evolving with time, and new genetics coming in the market, and so it'll be very hard to say that cannabis must stay in this range as on today based on our experience.
Yeah, that's a great point, Prasant. I think people need to understand that. Let me phrase the question a bit differently. So if we expect historically that most commercial cannabis in the States or in Canada is on average 18 to 20%, you know, we're not saying that it's impossible that a specific cultivator with a specific batch can't come close to 25, 30%. Like, it's possible. It just becomes especially more improbable as you're getting up to that 30%. But I think maybe that that kind of begs the question of maybe we should have our audience and us better understand what it takes to generate that final COA, that final lab result. So for anyone else, Daryl, Andrien, that hasn't spoken yet, can you take us through the major steps from sample to spreadsheet, so that people understand that it's not just the labs that are part of this equation?
Absolutely. I can get us started, and Daryl, feel free to jump in at any point. But really, you know, we're one part of the puzzle of the chain, and there are things that we can control, and there's many things that we don't have control over. So, you know, we can focus on what we do have control over, and that starts when we first receive the sample from the client. We don't have control over how it was sampled, when it was sampled, and so once we do receive the sample, at that point, one of the first things we want to do, particularly for dried flower, is make sure that, you know, in whatever quantity we get, typically we're not going to extract the entire amount. You know, you'd be looking at liters of solvent, and that becomes very impractical. So one of the key steps, and this applies to most lab testing that is done, is you need to create your own homogeneous sample. So we would typically mill the dried flower and obtain something that's homogeneous, and then subsample from there, do an extraction using an appropriate solvent, maybe sonicate the sample. There's different strategies that people use, but effectively we want to, at that point, get all of the cannabinoids out of that subsample into a solvent. Sometimes there's some cleanup steps along the way too, before it goes onto an instrument for analysis. As we're also preparing our samples, we want to make sure that, you know, we're trusting the process. You want to include QC along with that, so quality control samples. So that could be method blanks, it could be spikes that are included in the set, certified reference materials that are run along with your samples, just to make sure that when you're doing all of these things, you know, if something does go off, you have something within your sample set when you're analyzing it to kind of act as a red flag and say, hey, maybe we need to go back because something didn't check out. So having all of those checks in place at each step of the process is super critical. And again, in the lab, those are things that we have control over. So our samples go onto our instruments, and we, in order for us to actually get a value for the cannabinoids, we need to do something called calibration. So again, we have, you know, certified reference materials that we use as standards, and we can create something called a calibration curve. And from our curves, we can estimate what the concentration in the sample is that we obtained. And again, there's a whole bunch of QC checks around your calibration to make sure that it's valid, that things haven't degraded, that, you know, you didn't get a bad lot or batch of even your certified reference material, things can go off. So more things to check in on. And after that, there's also, you know, doing your calculations properly to kind of get your instrument response converted into a number. And then there's making sure that, you know, that number gets accurately put on your report and sent out to the client.
Thanks, Andrew. And Daryl, anything to add there on the sample to spreadsheet pathway, or anything you'd like to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good explanation, Adrian. Just working backwards from Adrian. You know, exactly. With all this QC we have, we're actually, as labs, we're probably using all the same standards. There's only a couple of out there. So calibration is fairly simple. We're all using a similar instrument, similar method. You know, we're all using an HPLC. So for the most part, I'm assuming. So really the method for extraction, it's not a complicated process. It's solvent. You can use chloroform and methanol, or you can use ethanol. There's a range of solvents you can use. You're going to use pretty much the exact same extraction efficiency. So what it really does come down to, at the end, if we're all calibrated the same, we're using the same standards, we have proficiency testing that we all pass, which means we're calibrated the same. It must come down to sample preparation, right? How much in the sample we're getting from the client, which, you know, as we all know, we don't control over. So if we're getting a representative sample client, we really need to make sure we're doing our best job to make homogenized sample that's representative of that client, and give a representative sample subsample. So there's some issues there that I've talked to other labs about, and I know they struggle with. So we've seen some issues there, and I know that can be a struggling point, and that's probably where I think we need to focus a lot as an industry. A lot of the LPs are they're following like an EP standard for subsampling their batch. They go to 100 kilos and they, you know, get 1,000 grams or whatever. Maybe they split it up. They keep their retains. You know, they send the lab 50 grams, and then if we're not doing a good job subsampling that, we've just let their whole process down because they're regulated on that type, right? But as we know, us as labs, we're not regulated on how we treat their samples. So we hope the LPs are supposed to regulate us. So I think that's probably in a lot of cases where, you know, a lot of this discrepancy comes from, and I think we need to focus on that.
Yeah, and I thanks, Daryl, and I really want to drive this point home and dwell on this a bit, because, you know, I think it's sometimes unfair that labs get a lot of the blame for the results that they generate or inevitably end up on a label, when they're just doing what they do is analyze cannabis. I hope, you know, the hope is always that the lab is following proper validated methods, and all their employees or analysts are trained, their QC is on point and nice and tight. You know, that's, if that's all well and good, it kind of puts labs in a very precarious place, because ultimately they run the tests on the samples they receive. And, you know, right now the regulations here in Canada are very vague as to how someone generates a sample. You know, as our association has had a sampling workshop last year where we got a bunch of people in a room, and it turns out pretty much everyone's doing things slightly differently. And, you know, when you have a 5 kilo batch from maybe a micro, and, you know, a lot of attention is paid to each plant, and, you know, it's all high quality and very much grown with love. And you know, maybe a 50-gram sample is representative. But if you're in a large greenhouse with hot spots and you end up with a half a ton lot, without a proper sample, you are biasing any downstream results for better or for worse. So what can we do as an industry? What can license holders do? Because we were discussing this, I think, John, before we started, you know, they're also in a precarious position because, yeah, they want a representative sample, but they also have a lot of things to consider from their business when they don't get the result that they hope for. So I guess two questions is, how can we as an industry do better to sample, to get representative samples, given that there doesn't seem to be too much enforcement or oversight from the regulator? And then what is causing that pressure, in your opinion, for these license holders to perhaps be a little selective when they sample?
It's interesting that part of batch size, I think, has been a problem since the start. A lot of people just went with large batch sizes, and as we saw the micro licenses come in, surprise, surprise, we saw more consistent testing. And that's because, to your point, smaller batch sizes, more attention, smaller batches coming through, therefore a larger representation. As we've moved through this new system, that definitely you're seeing larger batches, larger representation. But now, it's no surprise right now, and no surprise to me, that we're seeing flagrant THC scores rise at the same time that we're seeing the economy and the cannabis industry fall apart. So the excise tax issue that we are seeing right now is rippling into THC, and that's because where before there was markets other place to go, now all of a sudden they're in this spot where I have to sell it for this or else ... And so because of that, you're seeing a lot of people just, I must do this. This is my Hail Mary. I don't care what happens out of this, because if I don't do this, my entire place closes. And so that's the pressure that I think a lot of these people are under. And that's why you've seen them all of a sudden go off to these odd labs everywhere and pump out. All of a sudden, batch to batch, they go up 12%. Please. But I get it, it's the pressure they're on. But that's also, as I try to say from an industry saying, hey, I wish all your batch sizes were way smaller. They're like, yeah, but I'm not making any money. I would love to have smaller batch sizes, but smaller batch sizes lead to more testing, which lead to less profits. And right now, I got no money. So being able to even go back to somebody and say, hey, buddy, your batch size is too small. I think that's why you're having a lot of these issues. There's microclimates that happen inside of cannabis facilities. Larger the facility, the more likely there is for a microclimate. You're likely noticing those microclimates with your testing. They're like, yeah, but I have no money. So, and I think that correlation, it's strong, and it really is like we're hearing it from a lot of these growers. They need help from the government on the financial side. I think that will help out a lot, and it's going to help a lot of people in this industry. If not, you're just going to see all products go to export. All the good growers are going to go to export, and Canada's become this weird cesspool of odd THC products. So, a lot. It's no surprise. A lot of these products are now leaving Canada and being exported because they respect us on the other side, and they get tested on the other side, and it verifies the score. So, no, just use you guys and export. So that's the trend we're seeing, and I think it's caused by not only excise tax but also the pressure for the THC.
Hubert, go ahead.
I think that you did say a key word when you were asking the question, is hoping. Hoping for a result from something such as a plant is a very two-edged sword. I think that, first of all, you need to consider that the plant does what it does because it needs to, not because you want it to. That's the first point. And the second point is that if you have hope for a certain result, that means that you have a pressure for a certain result. That means that there are barriers of entry on the market that set those value. And I think that the first step would be to remove these barriers of entry. Pushing the producer to produce a certain amount of THC doesn't make sense, because if you ask for something, you will receive something. And usually this is where there are some malversation going around. So if you say that I want the highest level possible, then you will get the highest level possible, because if you want to sell, you need to play the game. If you don't play the game, you don't sell, you don't live. Well, yeah, it's figure of speaking. So you need to ensure that these barriers of entry are removed, and this can be done at two steps. First, it needs to be done on the consumer side. You need to educate them and saying that, no, you don't need to focus only on this single value. And the second part is that for some provincial buyer, they need to remove themselves from this mindset that you need to buy at this level, because else it puts so much pressure on the producer that it forces them to, eventually they need to, else they just close. So it kind of encouraged this Ouroboros of bad practice.
Yeah, John raised the point about people, businesses being under financial duress, leading to potential pressures to perform. And Hubert, I just want to add a bit of context there to what you said. You mentioned the provinces and the consumers. And it really is this vicious circle, right? I mean, when you look at the OCS, they do their quarterly or annual report and they poll, consumers, and they say, what do you look for when you buy cannabis? And they give them, a bunch of things to answer. And it's like price, potency, branding, maybe, aromas, but you can't really smell it. So consumers seem to associate high quality, good cannabis with one metric, high THC. Maybe now the terpenes are kind of coming in, but not everyone's doing them. And there's obviously issues there and how people test what they test for. But, if those products move, the provinces say, well, those products are moving, we want more of those. And then they draw this 23% line in the sand. And educating consumers, I guess, makes sense, but that's a long time, a long road. And when a consumer goes into a dispensary in Canada and they just see a bunch of single colored labels with different logos, the first question that they ask is, give me, what's your highest THC product, usually, in my experience.
But if you look at these products, though, like THC is about as useful to the quality of the product as eye color is to beauty. Sure. I've seen beautiful blue-eyed people and beautiful brown-eyed people, but by no means is it only blue-eyed people are beautiful and green-eyed people like me are not. It's like, sorry, that is not what it is. It is one of the characteristics of it. But I will say that, you are right. It is being pushed by the provinces. I don't quite understand how, other than the fact that we have done a very restricted job of actually educating people on the real intricacies of this product. The fact that you can see something that is low THC and you can get higher than you've ever been in your entire life. If that's the goal, don't look at THC, look at the health of the product and the health of the actual flower, the freshness of the product, the terpenes, the flavonoids. Look deeper into the product. But boy, is that a tough education piece when you're sitting at shelf, or when somebody comes in, doesn't even say a word, or you've got 30 to 40% of people, higher than that during the pandemic, that were buying online. And when you're online, you're even worse, because I'm looking at the OCS right now. I click on high THC products. Why? Why is this here? Why are we perpetuating this lie? It bothers me to no end, and I see it as, this is not only the death of great cultivars, this is the death of great growers. And the hand in step as this process is being perpetuated by these boards. It needs to stop. Canada is we're not able to really show ourselves or elevate ourselves globally as we continue here to just take products and just slap silly labels on them for some unknown reason. So if anyone can make this stop, please, OCS, if you're listening, get rid of this high potency stuff, please.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to see when, the provinces have a category called high THC. I mean, it just, that's one of the big issues. But, I just kind of switching gears a little bit, but on the same topic, I want to address this kind of myth, perhaps, or this opinion that I feel is a myth in this industry. Maybe Prasant or Daryl, Andrien can chime in. And John said, and rightly so, THC is in everything, right? We know that a high THC sample can be super dry, have no terpenes because they've been boiled off from improper storage and handling. It can just not be appealing, but it still passes the muster because it's got 30% on the label. But I think I would propose that accurate THC testing is important, and THC is the biggest active ingredient, at least in THC dominant flower. So does anyone want to challenge me on my proposition that THC does matter, not to the level that many people put it to, but there is a difference between 5% THC tested properly and 20% as far as the experience or the psychoactivity or the effect, medical or otherwise, that people are feeling. So does anyone want to kind of discuss that aspect of it? And I have one follow-up after that.
Love to jump in briefly here, and I think a lot of it comes down to maybe partly placebo effect, I'm going to say, or perception of what you think you're getting when you're really not. And as you mentioned, Tom, earlier, we did do a study on illicit material where we tested dried flower as well from a variety of dispensaries. They all claimed these dried flower products were 30-35% THC, and the people that are going into these dispensaries, where in all likelihood the product has never been tested and has just been somebody slapped a number on there saying, oh, this feels like it's 30% THC. And people go in and they build this expectation around that number, around the experience they have. When we tested those products, they came out at 11%. The highest was at 17% THC. So really way off the mark. And if you have people coming from, they're used to buying off of this legacy market, and now we're going to, they're again shopping maybe by THC. Their perceptions might be skewed as to, okay, they think they've been buying one product when they haven't, and so I don't think that's necessarily helping people's perceptions when it comes to cannabis products.
Thanks, Andrien. And go ahead, Hubert.
I just want to point out that in the scientific literature, we've been seeing a lot of type 1, type 2, and type 3 cannabis going around. And if you look at the draft regulation by the European Pharmacopoeia, they are actually following this type 1, type 2, type 3 classification, where it's basically no THC, THC CBD cultivar, and ITHC. And the ITHC is basically from 5 to 30% or 15 to 30%. I don't have the exact number in mind right now. So as you said, there's a difference between the 5% and the 20%, but is there a difference between the 15% and the 20% or 15% and 25%? So in my own personal view, I think that it should be simply classified as that. I mean, high THC, no THC, average THC, and that's how. Because from an analytical point of view, for me, 16% and 24% is basically the same number if you take into account all the error and all the variation into sampling or into the analytical method. So I think that's another thing, is that on the label it basically states that THC is the most important thing in the cannabis, because it has all these large yellow patch that said THC will get you high. THC is what gets you high. And if you look at the label, you only have 3 numbers, which is just basically THC and CBD. So if you, as a consumer, which is not trained, I would say, what do you use? Well, you use what's written on the label, and that's only what's written on the label, especially when you can't touch or smell the product.
That's a great point, Hubert. And maybe I'll throw it to Prasant or Daryl to kind of follow up on this. And we were just discussing this earlier, and this is a pet peeve of mine, having worked in the industry as a QA and seeing what slight variations in declared potency will drive sales. When Prasant or Daryl, how should consumers interpret lab results or labels? When we see a label with 2 decimal places, we automatically think that, this analysis is so precise and so accurate that the difference between 20.1 and 20.3 is significant. But as someone who works in a lab, runs a lab, how should consumers interpret? What are some best practices, given what Hubert said about these ranges and expected ranges?
Well, Tom, if I can take that on.
Sure.
So, before we get into the results, let's understand the nature of the plant materials we're talking. And the variability in the plant material, we all know this, right? In the same plant, you take different parts of the plant, you will not have the same THC. So we are starting with a commodity which has got so much variability. So it will be almost impossible to take any leaves from the same cannabis plant and expect the same THC. And that's what has been proven by some research. I was participating last week with the McGill University that we can do that, right? So then a certificate of analysis, I think John was mentioning, if you have a 200 gram or 200 kg of what you call batch, and you are sending me 5 grams of sample, and then you are saying that, hey, the rest of the 200 kg should be having the same THC as you got in the COA. So it's practically impossible that the 5 gram represents the whole so what you call 200 kg. So first we understand it's a challenge from the industry itself, the plant material itself, and then followed by the sampling procedure. Do you have a sampling procedure which can guarantee that every 1 gram sample you take will have uniform THC? No, we don't have that. We are not talking about drugs product. So we are expected to have the variability to start with. So then down the line, how the lab does their job. In my experience, that when it comes to the analytical part of the laboratory, the instrument, the variability is very, very low. But when it comes to the sampling from the lab side or from the customer side, that's where the most of the variability comes to the picture. More importantly, yes, there are things people are trying to what you call follow on fair means in terms of what you call bumping the THC. But how do you control that? We as a laboratory, we receive a sample and we test as we receive, right? And so when it comes to if the market is driven by THC, it has to start from the regulatory body like Health Canada. They have to determine how should be sampled. As you know, the California has come up with their own testing method. So they are detecting the lab how the testing method for cannabinoids should be done. So we are expecting similar kind of guidance from what you call Health Canada or any regulatory bodies to drive the communication gap between the industries.
Thanks, Prasant. And I want to actually switch gears next, right after this last question for Daryl, into the actual testing side of things. But Daryl, if you're speaking to a consumer, if you're educating someone at a dispensary and you have a bunch of products, do you yourself, can you give us an example of how you interpret labels and kind of what Hubert said, like, is a 16% the same as a 25% to you? Would you kind of give a bracket of plus minus 2 to 3% absolute, or even 5%, given the variability of a within plant, within lot, sampling and testing, and all those errors that can compound throughout? What's the best practice you would recommend?
Yeah, I guess I tell most people, consumers, and that you're going to have, I mean, it depends on, it's usually a percent difference, right? It depends on the grower, the size of the batch, all this. But, I usually draw it into whatever we're dealing with the percentage these days. So I say, if you're looking at a 25% THC product, it's probably a 23, it's probably also a 27. If that 25 is a true average based on, right from them subsampling to us receiving it, right? No difference that a 20 is a 22 and an 18. There's obviously more variation depending on some places, but I try to let everybody know that, and they realize that people are trying to achieve the highest. So sometimes they are grading their sample out differently, or maybe there's a bias on subsampling, but that's mostly what I tell them.
Awesome, and that brings up another good point when it comes to regulations. Right now for dried cannabis, the cannabis regulations say you send a sample, it's got to be representative, it's got to be tested with a validated method and in a lab that has a validated method. But whatever sample you get, that's what goes on the label. Whereas with extracts or edibles, you have the ability to declare a static or a target, and as long as your lab result is plus minus 15% in the case of extracts, you're good. So I have issues with that kind of range on the high level, because an 80% distillate plus minus 15% relative is like 70 to 95% or thereabout. That's a little too wide. But would anyone here object if Health Canada said, okay, you know what, let's simplify this labeling and you're allowed, I don't know, upwards of 5% absolute or 10% relative to whatever you're claiming on the label to what you've tested? Do you think that would, kind of along the lines of what Hubert said, let's kind of bracket these things into classes or groups rather than relying on 2 decimal lab reports to deceive the consumer?
Yeah, there should be a range, and there should be a percent difference I think they could have off their label claim. I think that would be fair, just like all the rest of the products.
Honestly, most of this cannabis higher than 15%, good. There wasn't a problem in the grow. The cultivar didn't stunt. There wasn't hop latent. There wasn't something odd that happened. It's cannabis. It's healthy. How are the terps? Look good. How's the moisture? Look good. Marked as high THC for me. That's good. Like it's, yeah, I think the fact that we've gone into the minutia of this and into, oh, I'm getting so much higher at 20 or 32 compared to 28 compared to 26, you're fooling yourself. And there is no SIBO and placebo effects inside of every medication, including cannabis. There's also endocannabinoid systems are different for each person. Every single person out there is different. Take it into edibles, that becomes even more. You know, you could have one person takes 2 milligrams, they're high as ever. Another person can take 200 milligrams and, you know, does a presentation on a webcam. You know, it's like there's no issues. There's no, it's that endocannabinoid system is so different for everybody. And to think that doesn't expend into flower, it's silly. And the other fact is there are still so many things inside of cannabis we don't know. We don't know if there's a real entourage effect. We don't know if canaflavin A, B, and C are actually driving more than what they are. We don't know. And you know, this is a nascent industry that needs a lot of that education, that needs a lot of that research, because frankly, we don't know. And you know, anecdotally, you know, I've given products that I grew in my backyard that I know are 16% THC. I give it to somebody and they're like, "Wow, you must have dosed that. I got so crazy high." No, that was outdoor. It was 4% terpenes and 16% THC. That's a great product every day of the week. I don't care what the OCS says. You're wrong. So you know, people need to realize that, you know, that THC, it's what the cultivar kind of gives. It's what's inside of the product, and being able to kind of misrepresent the product. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice for Canada. And now, especially as people are trying to export, they're running into walls, and you know, tough, because you should have tested right in the first place and you wouldn't have run into those same walls, you know, are inflating, inflating your THC test. So, and I think that's the real thing that might mature the industry, is that because the price is dive bombing in Canada, most people now are looking at Germany, Australia, and Israel to push their products. And you get tested here. I don't care if you say 38% THC, you're not. But I don't care what you say, because they're going to test it in Australia and come back and go, this whole load's going to garbage. Like, no, you didn't hit. This isn't right. So I think as we're starting to see that maturity come, especially through export, we might start to see some of this move into Canada. But right now, you know, we're looking like idiots on the international market from what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, you know, ultimately there's a fine balance. We know that people access cannabis, dried cannabis, for medical purposes, and there should be some sort of accurate dose associated with that for those purposes. But at the same kind of token, yeah, anything over 15-20% is probably going to do the job for what most people want it to do, right? So, Hubert, did you have another point you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Health Canada do like to peek over the fence and see what's being done, like over the ocean or to our southern neighbor. I mean, Europe has been dealing with this kind of inflation, well, in plant products, since they have been regulating their plant product for the last 100 years. And they have been there during that situation. So when cannabis will be legalized in Germany, there will be a pharmacopoeia method, there will be clear procedure, there will be clear range. I think that currently the draft is 10%. I'm really looking forward to see if they keep that. The USP has published something also, it would be 20%, according to the article. But I mean, especially when you start to have a more mature industry that start dealing internationally, I think it will be very important to start harmonizing ourselves on the other country, especially since Canada has this lacking approach regarding any natural health product, which when you try to enter the European market, you hit the wall because it's day and night. So I think that the range idea is already in action, just not in Canada.
But Hubert, isn't that sad? Isn't that sad as a person inside of Canada? Isn't that a sad state that we have come into, that, you know, we're the laughing stock of the world as we're exporting these products? Like, isn't that sad?
Yeah,
you know,
it's disappointing.
It's disappointing. And it's like, this is not what I thought legalization was going to look like in Canada. This is not what I thought, us moving out first as a First Nation, moving towards legalization, I did not think that in the end that we would be in this position. And I think there's a lot of players that need to kind of take it on the chin here for what they've done to get us in this position.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes it's, when you're first down the path, you might take the wrong turn, and it's hard to kind of go back. But I do like what we were discussing, sampling and the variability of the plant. I want to take the last 10 minutes. I'm talking to a bunch of people that work or run labs. Let's talk about the testing side. I'll start it off with this, with my experience and in my opinion, and then I'll kind of throw it out there. So I've heard this discourse online, on Twitter, in the industry, that, oh, testing is BS because everyone does it differently and it's so hard. And, my background as an analytical chemist, working with ultra trace heavy metals, for example, where I was working with highly sensitive equipment where I could detect to the parts per quadrillion level. I look at THC, which exists in dried cannabis as the dominant analyte at 20 or 30%. I see cannabis testing as trivial generally, discounting the sampling and the variability side of things. Once a lab receives that sample, would you agree or disagree, anyone here, that testing that sample as you receive it and producing a repeatable, reproducible, accurate result is possible? Like, can we put that myth to bed, please? I'll open it up to anyone that wants to comment on that, because it's not an issue in my mind. We have the equipment, we have the technology, we're just lacking some standards. So please, the floor is yours. Anyone wants to go?
I would say that when we started in 2014, there were no method whatsoever. So we were testing everything in triplicate, and we never had variation problem. So as long as the sample is well homogenized, like the analytical side is not a problem at all. But you need to homogenize to have a well homogenized sample. And I mean, if you look at the proficiency testing, the sample that are sent to our lab, they are pre-homogenized. And I'm pretty sure that everyone will have about the same result on an homogenized sample, which really point out to the sampling or the homogenization method, which this is where most labs diverge. And this is also what is most hard to test, because if you cannot produce a non-homogenized homogenized sample, I don't know if it's clear, but if you can just pull bud and know that this result will be this value, then how can you compare lab if you already have variation there? And this is something that is currently hard to do.
And that's the sample prep part of, the preparation. Yeah. But
yeah,
the
sample
actual
prep
analysis through an HPLC, a chromatographic analysis, it's trivial, right? I mean,
yeah.
Does anyone disagree with that, right?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Adrian.
Yep. And again, I think the messaging here is very much that, the challenge isn't lack of having the right method per se in terms of what we're doing in the labs. We're, I'm sure, all doing fairly similar things, and I don't think there's necessarily a need for everybody to follow a prescriptive, identical step-by-step method for how you end up with your results. The challenge, again, is on that initial sample that we obtain, and we've done interlaboratory comparisons as well, and we've matched up with other laboratories that have tested the same homogenized sample, and that's again key, because we've leveled that playing field, and so that gives us confidence, and it gives the other labs that have participated in these types of comparisons confidence that, hey, look, if we're starting with that same homogeneous material, we're getting the same results. We're doing our part that we have control over, and really then it goes back to, okay, well, the result then that we're issuing, if the starting material wasn't really representative, then even that, the result that's issued, whatever that number is, it's going to be a range. And it goes back to what Hubert mentioned as well, where it might make more sense to talk about, our cannabinoid concentrations in terms of ranges or classifications. And yeah, I think there's more conversations that to be had around that.
And I know we have 5 minutes left before some of our panelists have a hard stop, so we'll go right to then, and then we'll do a Q&A after. But thanks, Andrien and Hubert. And Andrien, I want to kind of ask some of our other panelists here, John, Prasant, and Daryl here, specifically, the topic of standardization comes up a lot, and it rightly so, right? When you standardize something, even if maybe it's not the best standard, at least that's what everyone's doing, and it gives confidence to the industry, the regulators, and consumers that at least things are being done the same way, and it eliminates those variables as a potential source of error. But there's different types of standardization. There's like Andrien mentioned, prescriptive, where it's like do this method with this equipment and this ratio of solvent to dry cannabis, or there's performance-based standards where you do what you want, but you got to meet these QC checks, your dupes, your spikes, your blanks, all this stuff, your limit of linearity, all that stuff. So John, Prasant, or Daryl, some or all of you, are you in favor of standardization, or do you think the status quo as is okay, and we just need better clarity and enforcement on the sampling and sample prep?
Well, Tom, if I can answer, I think I will go with both approach. Standardization of the method across the industry, at the same time, reinforcement of the due diligence. And that has to come from all parties. We as a lab, we want to do the right things, and we all want to do the right things. But what is right at this point of time, it's not very black and white.
Daryl or John?
Yeah, I'm totally agree that probably standardization is required. I think we have, the test is easy, like you said. I agree with Andrien and Hubert. Like, there's all this stuff that's simple, but it is come down to the sample. And I think even when you look at other standardized methods out there, they don't relate back to, they go to the analytical, they don't go to the method preparation, the method subsampling. Now, we started in industry with a few LPs that are highly regulated by Health Canada. Now we have hundreds and hundreds. Health Canada can't possibly go to all the micros and make sure they're doing subsampling properly. Changing the regulation on Health Canada is going to take time if they do. There's a certain amount of what we can do. We have, provinces, maybe they scrutinize these high THC numbers more and do more testing. I don't know. But as a lab group, with, even what we talk about C45 all the time, we can do a better job. We can come up with our own standardization and promote that. Proficiency testing is great, but it doesn't, again, address this preparation. And I talked to a lot of other labs, and they prepare completely different and very biased ways sometimes, because they say we don't have a way to do, we haven't figured out how to homogenize a sample well. So that to me is still a huge problem. And if we don't regulate, standardize to a point, that I think we're in trouble. And I don't think the method and solvent necessarily needs to be there, but if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes.
The one thing I'll say here is that, we do have standardized testing. It's DAB testing. And it's the DAB testing program that works export to Germany. I think for us, it's, I find it odd that when, we've done hundreds of samples that have been exported around the world, Germany, Israel, Australia, they get tested by another lab on the other side of the world, and we come within 1 or 2% of them. But yet I see ring tests come from customers, and it's like 5 or 6 customers with me all inside the bullseye. And then there's this like, okay, come on. And before, you may have had it where they're like, well, let's be conservative. Let's think about the future of this company. Let's make sure we're sticking inside the bullseye. And now they just go right to the top and grab the one that'll give them the most flagrant thing. So, I wish I could say that a standardization would fix it, but the fact that there's no auditing in this facility, that in this industry for the labs, doesn't matter. Standardized or not, how do you know they're using the standardized procedure? How do you know it's still being done right without auditing outside of just the customer audits? I don't see it answering anything. And in fact, there already is standardized testing in the industry with DAB testing. So, and that has changed nothing. So I'm not seeing it without a good step from Health Canada or some provincial buyer that steps in and goes, okay, great, you're running the standardized test, let me watch it. Show me the data, take me backwards through it. If you're not doing that, it doesn't matter. There's always, because I still have the problem here is that I still don't know definitively these people that are way above the bullseye when I send out, when we see those ring tests, I still don't know that's not fraud. And until I do, standardized doesn't matter.
Yeah. And
John,
you
I
make-
agree with you with the regulation point, but we can, as an industry, we could regulate ourselves. Other industries have done it. We've done it in other areas where, you know, small committees like a C45 or DQA, or we have compost committees where we've said this testing goes really off and it's cheating the industry. So we could actually do this. You know, we talked about the C45. It's not an easy solution, but it's doable, and we could do it and regulate each other.
I literally just found out about C45 like 6 weeks ago when I was at the Can Expo. So sorry, I didn't actually know, but that was one of the reasons why we published our data. And you know, I asked every single person on this call, if you're proud of the data you're pumping out, if you're proud of the dried flower you're pumping out and all those scores, release the data. Show the world you're proud. Show the world you're proud of everything you've done. Show me you're not the person pumping out 38 and 48% THC. Show me. Show the world. Show the consumers. Show Health Canada. Show the OCS. Show the BC. Show Saskatchewan. Show all these boards. Show it.
Yeah,
and if
and
not,
I think
then
that
what are you
brings up
doing?
a bigger conversation. You know, as an industry, you know, we are playing in a regulated field, in a sector that's supposed to create an even playing field, and yet we've seen that the industry is moving and changing and evolving too quick for the regulators and the regulations and the laws to keep up. So on one hand, you know, yes, we probably do expect more from the regulators, either provincial, which is a great point. You know, the provinces are the gatekeepers, and they're the ones asking for the high THC products. So maybe they should keep their suppliers honest. But what other tools in our toolbox as a private industry do labs or license holders have? The last question before we get into Q&A, there's standardization. We can all agree to use this method. That might be very difficult. We can do ISO 17025 accreditation. We can do PT testing. I'll throw it out there. Whoever wants to answer before we kind of finish it off and break into Q&A. What do you think is the next best thing we as an industry can do to police ourselves, to help our consumers and the industry regain confidence? Because right now it is a little bit of a Wild West, and there is no end in sight, especially because no one's profitable, or few people are profitable, and people got bigger problems in the grand scheme of things. Hubert, go ahead. You had your hand up.
There's always private certification. I know that in the industrial hygiene sector, among other, there are private certification where there are labs that pull together to create their own small ISO certification that do audit for their industry. There's also the same thing with pesticide in Europe, among other. So that would be, I think, the quick and dirty method, because it doesn't require to pass through regulator, but it just require a medium and a will. So, and after that, it require to have a level playing field for everyone. Because in the end, the goal of all these accreditation and certification are only for one reason, and it's to get better as a lab. So, I mean, if an accreditation, I'm currently in my ISO's audit right now. I mean, the auditor are right here. And the queue is always the same, is we will find non-conformity. That's normal. But as long as you go forward and as long as you get better each time, that's the way to do. And that's, I think, the way that this needs to be approached. We are in the budding industry. We are in a young industry that is still teething. So we just need to go forward and to go better.
And if I can add to Hubert's point, we as the industry body needs to decide what will be that gold standard. If you look at the GFSI for the food industry, basically it was the food industry determining the standards for the industry. So instead of coming somebody else determining what's good for us, we should do our own standards.
Thanks, Prasant, Hubert. Anyone else want to comment?
I'll go back. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Yeah, show me your data. And you know, if there's an OCS person on the call right now, add a little tiny row to every single sample on the OCS. Who tested this? Because I'll tell you right now, that will all of a sudden change a lot of buying decisions, because they'll go, which lab pulled out 39% THC? Off my list. Now I can just search by the OCS by that. Great.
I too have been.
Shop with your wallets. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. I don't think there's another answer for that right now. And you know, I feel bad for Health Canada. They're in a tough situation, and this is a tough moving kind of target for them to hit. But for the time being, more data, more transparency. Transparency is the only thing that's going to help us now.
I would agree, John. And, you know, I always reference this Nature paper published from the state of Washington, because they made all of their THC data public, allowing researchers to review about 20,000 different samples from 10 labs. And a simple statistical analysis was able to identify certain labs that are not showing normal distribution curves on their you know, thousands of samples they generate. And yeah, it was anonymized for the paper, but the regulators ended up shutting down some labs because, you know, even if the issue of sampling and bias sampling by license holders adds to the complexity, you know, through statistics and high sample numbers, you're able to kind of say, you know what, there's just no way that this lab is doing something right, or maybe they're all doing something wrong. But I agree, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So
sorry, just one thing. There hasn't been one recall to date. There hasn't been one audit to date throughout all of this. And just let that sink into everybody on the call.
I mean, there's been recalls for, you know, for mislabeled
poorly labeled products, not by THC inflation. Under no circumstance have we seen this issue we are talking about right now cause one recall. And until there is, we are playing a game without a referee.
Yeah, and the C45 Quality Association has written almost 2 years ago to date in writing when we meet with Health Canada, flagging this very issue and saying, step one, go ask the labs for some of their data sets and just do some statistical analysis. Any undergrad can do that and show you that something's off, and then take it from there. Don't waste your time targeting people that on paper statistically seem to be doing well. I will end it there for our Q&A. Hubert, Andrien, John, Prasant, Daryl, thank you so much. I know there's a lot to talk about and this time flies. So if anyone has to log off now because of other kind of scheduling conflicts, please go ahead. But we're going to spend another 10-15 minutes answering some Q&A. We have 33 questions, so we will not get through all of them, and we've already kind of touched on a lot of them. But I like this one from Nathan Jones here. Nathan said, and this is part of this kind of sunlight disinfectant discussion we just had, is there any interest in participating in a blinded interlab study? So, you know, for example, someone like the C45 Quality Association procures and prepares the samples and then sends it to participating labs who publish the results either through that independent, you know, mediator or just directly, kind of like a public PT test or round ring testing. Does anyone want to discuss that? Hubert, you have your hand up.
Well, I just want to say the PT results from the PT Canada ring testing are public. I mean, you can go on the website and see the PT result. The labs are anonymized, but you can see the result that they got, and you can see the variation, you can see the standard deviation. All these are public. And I think all lab here participate in these interlab study. However, I do believe that there will be in the future more specific interlab study going around. So, and all these that are public, however, they are anonymized.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree. The problem we know with the PT, of course, is that it doesn't really take an effect a lot of our sample prep. So actually part of the C45 Hubert, I think it was one of your colleagues at PhytoChemia made a great ring test that we were going to try to adopt a year or so ago now. Because we talked about this, you know, and it was right from giving people a sample that's full flower, ground sample, and extracted sample. So we could all review our process all the way through and make sure we were, and I thought that was a great idea. We just, of course, you know, fell short of all accomplishing that as a group of labs. But to me, that, you know, that is a great, you know, and that would come in with some type of, you know, C45 quality or however we want to do, whether regulated. I think Cala was even on board with regulating for us. So I think that would be good. I know a lot of my clients, your clients have all done ring tests, right? With all of us, we see their data. They say, oh, this is what you got. So I mean, I think we just need to do it as an organization. That would be.
I think it was me and Zimmerman from Saskatchewan Research Council. SRC.
Okay, it was you. Yeah, yeah. No, it was a phenomenally well-written way to do a ring test. I thought it was awesome. So maybe we can get back to something that way.
Yeah, I was sure.
I think the industry would love to see it, and it would be a badge of honor for those that participate. And like John said, I mean, I think it'd be good business for labs to participate in that. I have another, yeah,
a little bit like the emerald testing in the US, but
exactly. Yeah.
possible to do in Canada.
Canada, yeah. Another question just further down the list by Philippe Depot. I hope I'm saying that right. Phil says, hi, Phil here, founder and QAP for Microprocessor, Quebec Craft Cannabis. I have 2 questions for the panelists. At the end of the day, a lab manager has to sign off on the COA. As a brand owner, I'm expecting this lab manager to use their scientific background to understand cannabis above 30% is extremely rare. For example, the 99th percentile. And challenge the producer to send the sample or request another sample or even reject the COA. Why is this not happening? And I'll kind of give my little anecdote. As a QAP, I've had this kind of happen to me. I've worked with a lot of you on the call in your labs over the years, and I've never gotten a call from a lab or an email or a flag saying, hey, your sample is too high. But I always got one from a lab saying, hey, this one is kind of lower than the last 3 samples of this variety you had. Are you sure everything's okay? We just wanted to flag it. So, I guess that's good business, but why don't we see that? Why do we see labs putting out 35% COAs? And, many people think it's one lab. It's not. I've seen that number published from a number of labs across Canada. Why is that happening? Or is it because, well, the lab is confident in their test and therefore they're signing off on the QC of their test, not necessarily that this is representative?
I don't want to hog the time, but there are two levels to this question. I think the first one is, how do you flag someone stating that this THC level is out of spec? I think that the first thing is that you need to have the spec regarding THC. So not everyone is able to give a spec regarding THC, like contaminant, that's easy. You have the USP, etc., etc. But regarding THC, when we receive a sample, we don't know what to expect. And that's actually good, because as a lab, you are supposed to be blind to the sample. You are not supposed to skew the result because you hope to have some result. So I think that's more or less depending on what you have as a relationship with the lab. But personally, internally, as an internal processor, everything that is over 30% is retested to ensure that it is not a fluke from the lab, because these values are so out of spec that we guess that it's more an error from our part than a real value. And I don't think we've seen a lot of 30% yet. And the second part here is, one thing is important, is that, and so especially since Philip is from Quebec, Quebec has special regulation regarding chemists. So if me as a chemist, I sign a report which has value that are preposterous or that are clearly false, I could be sued personally, not the lab, me personally, and lose my license to operate, because we have a regulation that are law that control chemists and state that if you sign something, you need to ensure that you have the competence and the knowledge to be able to sign it. So, but Quebec is alone in this, I think, in Canada, and in fact in North America. So in the case of, in this specific case, then the lab manager is responsible and is personally responsible for what he signed.
So curious about there, why are there Quebec labs that don't have signatures and don't have the order of chemists signing off on COAs? Curious about that.
That's a question that you should ask the order of chemists.
And we have.
And then, yeah, so.
There's the problem. Like it's an illusion that we have here coming from that group, and it's I love the concept of it. I love the concept of it, but I've yet to see it turn.
I can tell you that they are slow to operate, but they do operate.
I hold your optimism. That'd be great. That would be awesome if that eventually happened. But this is just going to continue to be an issue. I just don't, standardized or otherwise, I just don't see an issue. That piece right there, the order of chemist thing, and just the idea that is, to me, it's another veil of just, there's a board looking at, there's no referee. There's no referee. So pause, stop. And if there's a referee, he's so far behind the plate, he has no idea what's happening. So it's useless. And I think that's the real situation we're running into, is that we believe that there is someone overlooking us, and there's not. And because of that, I think a lot of these labs have really realized there's no one watching them, and they're just doing whatever they want, and including order of chemist or whoever you believe you're being controlled by. It's just not happening. I love the concept of ring test, and one of the things that I find interesting is ring test. Why are people publishing ring tests? We see them all the time. You guys, I know all of you see ring tests all the time. How come that doesn't go back to anywhere? How come that doesn't go back to a group? Like, it would be great even to have that part of the regs or something, that the ring test must go back to some spot. It would be great. So I think that data would be very useful to a lot of people. I love the concept of the ring test, especially when it's done right, especially when it's done in stealth. And I do agree with Daryl here that you cannot use these kind of normal things, because what people don't realize, it's a vial of something. It's not a normal product. People know something weird has arrived, and therefore they can change accordingly because they realize they're being judged. When a blind ring test is hitting a lab, I think that's where you're going to get the best results. But again, until there's an audit behind that even piece, until then, that piece is still in my head, and until that's out of my head, until I see an audit, until I see a recall, it is.
I just want to point out that until 2020, lab couldn't send sample to other lab, and this really hindered the standardization of lab. They did change this in the last regulation update, which is a good test, which now allows us to do ring tests. By the way, we just received our new license, and it's specified that we can send to other lab for this reason. So I think that, as I said, on a certain side, it's a new industry that went all the way and in every possible way, and now we just need to pick everyone back in, and now that we can collaborate and we can send sample everywhere, that's where we need to go now.
And would any of you support ISO 17025, for example, as being a requirement under the regulations to operate?
So long as it was all methods, so long as it was all matrices, and not someone saying, oh, I do nutritional supplements, therefore I'm ISO 17025. No, you're not. I do heavy metals for cannabis, therefore I'm 17025. No, you're not. You're using methods that are not under that scope. And I think as we look at it, there's I love the concept of ISO, but the more I dig into it, the more I realize it's in an immature state, even as you look at that. And as you look at the execution of it, you've got to think that for every single solitary method you have, you're doing a PT back to a group. There's not even that many PTs out here. And you're grabbing from piece to piece to even put together to do your ISO. It's something that I've spent a lot of time on, and yet inside of Canada, I've yet to see a 17025 lab that hits the kind of what I would believe would be the high north standards. So I love the concept of it, and I love the idea of it, but I've yet to see it kind of become a mature accreditation, or that someone could actually say like, yep, they've done that, therefore. It does help, still not the full answer.
So I certainly think there's a lot of merit in accreditation, because us as third-party labs, who is auditing the third-party labs? So by becoming involved with Standards Council of Canada, they send independent auditors to your site. They start digging through and checking into how you're operating. And I think we do this because we understand the value beyond cannabis. It's something many of our clients require. It's required by some regulations as well. We wouldn't be able to offer some of the tests we didn't have ISO 17025 accreditation. And it really speaks, I think, to an organization's mindset as well, where you're looking for people, auditors, to come in, pick holes in what you do, and it's really coming from a place of continuous improvement, and so we welcome that, and we think we're happy to participate in that. We're happy to keep updating our scope of accreditation, and I think it's not going to make things worse by any means. I think it can only raise people up, and it can only raise up this industry and improve the quality across the board.
Awesome. Okay, well, it's getting pretty late. I do have one final question to kind of end it off with, and then we'll just kind of wrap it up because we're coming up an hour and a half here. But we've discussed as a group here the issues with sampling and how that puts labs in a potential disadvantage because they only are good as the sample that they receive and test. We know that cannabis is a highly variable plant, and sometimes people unknowingly will have poor sampling practices, and which can lead to bad results. We know that some labs can maybe not have the best quality standards, so that's kind of like the unconscious bias. But then there's the kind of other side of the coin, which is the fraud. And we've discussed and seen in other industries how fraud can really have an impact on the confidence of an industry and then lead to more regulations. We know that at the lab, fraud could be possible, but if you put enough controls in place, quality controls, and you have other people verifying and retesting, you can control that. The one thing we can't really control as an industry is fraud occurring at the license holder for whatever reason. It doesn't matter if they need to save their business and they need to generate a sample. Hubert in the beginning mentioned Brix, where geologists were salting the cores with gold flakes. There was a question that Philippe here asked as the second part is, do you think that there's license holders salting their dried flower with keef or hash or distillate or THCA? Do we think that's going on? And if so, what can labs do to prevent accepting those results when they see that? Just want to kind of finish it off there.
I hear about it. I've yet to see it. I've yet to see this salting or adding extract to things. People have infused flower though, and there's lots of infused flower in the market right now. So yeah, there's purposefully infused flower hitting the market right now, but it's marked infused flower. I'm not seeing this piece. And I think it's like, even as you looked at it, we take a 52 megapixel photo of every single product that comes in the door. So if you poured isolate or distillate all over, it'd be super obvious. Also, it'd be obvious to the people that even doing the analysis. I'm not seeing it. I hear that is from people that, is the butcher putting his thumb on the scale, or are they sprinkling some stuff on top? I'm not seeing it. Not to say it doesn't exist, but so far my customers haven't slipped one past, because it would be obvious. You'd see this flower that's always coming in and then off the scale, it'd cause an OT. You'd be in and out of trend, you'd be retesting, it'd be odd, you'd be looking at the product. So not seeing it yet, not saying it doesn't exist, but we haven't seen it yet to date.
I've seen it happen for sure. I've had people admit to me they did it. One, they were trying to test us. They said, "Oh, you can't test right because you tested my flower."
That I've seen. I've seen the spiking because they try to FFT them, but not in a real product hitting market. Yeah.
And really, they didn't know how to grade their own product, and their keef product didn't test as high. So yeah, and that's the other thing too, is usually they spike with keef or something, and keef only hits around 40% a lot of the times, right? So when you get flower that's 37%, it's kind of crazy. So but I've seen people spike, but I don't think most people are, but I'm sure it happens.
Well, one thing that we do, I don't think it's currently can currently be done in the cannabis industry, but one thing that we do into other industry where we test for fraud is that often when there's a compound of interest, so let's say that we take linalool in lavender, is that we look at ratio of minor compound, for example. So we all know the metabolic process, this biosynthetic process of THC. So there may be some research project that can be that can be done here, but if you spike, usually you will throw the ratio of these minor compounds, which are much harder to spike with. So in other industry, this is one of the way that we use to check for spiking, among other. But in cannabis, I don't think there's any information regarding this.
Yeah, I've heard of stable carbon or water isotopes, oxygen being used to kind of differentiate from different sources and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately to wrap it up, it sounds like, this is a nascent industry. It is, I think we're coming up on the 10-year mark since the MMPR first came out, but we're we're still evolving. There's a lot to figure out. I think the rapid growth in license holders and the limited resource at Health Canada has definitely stifled enforcement on the ground. Obviously, COVID had a big impact on that. And of course, there's a lot of market pressure from consumers down to provinces, which puts pressure on the license holders to get some desirable results, which puts pressure on the labs to produce some potentially desirable results. So I don't know. I don't think we've solved the issue. I think at least done a good job highlighting to our audience that it is a multifaceted issue. And as much as the labs are key here, they are one of many stakeholders or, cogs in the wheel, in the system that ultimately contribute to the result being generated. But license holders need to kind of make sure that they're being ethical and that they're doing everything they can to sample properly and submit that. So I know we've had like 40 questions. We've answered like 3 of them, but this has been a great discussion. This is recorded. We'll post this sooner than later. And I just want to thank Hubert, Andrien, John, Daryl, and Prasant, who had to leave early. Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience. We love having these conversations. On the behalf of the Board of Directors of C45 Quality Association, please check us out. Please join us. And we want to put on more events like this. So reach out to us if you have an idea. If you want to participate, we have increased our communication internal process dramatically over the last few months. And of course, we're always looking for the next best topic to discuss. So thanks, everyone. Hubert, go ahead.
I just want to say that there are some very interesting questions, so I probably won't be able to answer them, but I offer people, I'm active on Reddit, maybe some of you are. I really would like to answer some of these questions. So if you allow me, I can answer them by writing, or if you just can keep the chat open, I don't mind saying, up to you. Or
Okay, why don't we end this? I'll send you the questions, because if I leave, then the whole webinar kind of goes. I'll send them to you in a spreadsheet from Zoom. And yeah, there are plenty. I think we've touched on a lot of parts, but we don't have a limited time, as much as I'd like to nerd out with all of you. But thanks again, everyone. Thanks for participating, and until next time, take care.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you. Thanks a lot.